36%. That's how fast one company's revenue grew in a single year. One company you've probably never watched, sitting quietly underneath every AI headline you did watch. 3 big labs can announce models on the same afternoon. And not a single chip in any of them was made by the lab that took the credit. The hardware all came from the same place. So the number that actually explains this whole stretch isn't a benchmark score or evaluation. It's a growth rate from a supplier nobody bothers to put on stage. Let me show you exactly where it's hiding. Think about the last few weeks. A frontier model drops, and within hours a rival ships its own. Then a third. The tech press calls it a launch war, one lab stealing another's thunder. Wrong frame. Sure, these companies compete on demos and benchmarks, but underneath, they aren't independent. They share a spine. Everyone assumes they're watching a race between rivals. What they're actually watching is a cue. And the moment you see that cue, the timing stops looking random and starts looking mechanical. Here's the framework to hold for the next few minutes. Supply, demand, and signaling. Start with supply. Exactly one company on Earth can print the most advanced AI chips at scale, and it isn't Nvidia. Nvidia designs the blueprint. The actual printing happens at a contract manufacturer in Taiwan that almost never gets named on stage. Nvidia gets the trillion-dollar headlines. The factory gets the orders. That company is TSMC. Every Nvidia Blackwell chip, every custom accelerator Meta and Amazon designed, the silicon inside Apple's devices, all of it flows through the same foundry. One vendor sitting underneath an entire industry. And this week, that vendor told us in hard numbers exactly how hot the demand really is. That's the number I promised you at the top. Hang on, because it's bigger than it sounds. Here are the figures TSMC just put out. Quarterly revenue of roughly $39.5 billion, a record, up 36% from a year ago and nearly 12% from the previous quarter. June alone set a fresh monthly high, up almost 68% year over year. When your supplier grows that fast, it isn't because one customer got excited. It's because all of them did, at the same time, all reaching for the same chips. Here's the part that ties straight back to the timing. TSMC's most advanced line, the 3nm node, where frontier chips are built, is fully booked for the year. Fully. No spare capacity sitting on a shelf. Picture one bakery that supplies every restaurant in a city, and its ovens are booked solid. Suddenly every restaurant's menu depends on that one kitchen's schedule. That's the AI industry right now, drawing from a single constrained well. Now think about what that does to a launch calendar. If your newest model needs the newest chips, and those chips arrive in waves from a single supplier, then your ability to ship is gated not by your own genius, but by when the silicon shows up. And everyone's silicon shows up on roughly the same cadence. So everyone's launch is bunched together. The same-day drop isn't a marketing conspiracy, it's a shared clock nobody in the room controls. Want proof the well is that tight? The giants have started rationing each other. Google, which builds its own Gemini models, has been so short on compute that it capped how much capacity even Meta, one of its biggest customers, was allowed to buy, and Meta had to tell its own engineers to conserve tokens. Sit with that. When the biggest companies in the world are rationing the other biggest companies in the world, the squeeze is not a story. It's the whole environment. And the money confirms it. TSMC lifted its capital budget for this year to somewhere between $52 and $56 billion, up from about $41 billion the year before. That's a company pouring tens of billions into concrete, land, and machines because it genuinely cannot make chips fast enough. You don't spend like that on a fad. You spend like that when you're convinced the demand is real. And more importantly, still early. But supply is only half the story, and here's where it gets genuinely strategic. Once every lab is gated by the same supplier, timing itself becomes a weapon. In a market with only a handful of serious players, nobody can afford to look like they shipped late, or slow, or scared. Picture a poker table where everyone can see everyone's stack. If a rival is rumored to launch Thursday, you don't launch Friday and hand them a clean, uncontested news cycle. You launch Thursday too or Wednesday, and split the attention down the middle. So releases get pulled forward and jammed together, defensively. Nobody wants to be the lab whose big reveal got quietly buried under somebody else's headline an hour earlier. There's a third clock and it's financial. These labs aren't just raising money anymore, they're heading for public markets. Anthropic is reportedly prepping to list this fall, running at something like $47 billion in annualized revenue, and valued near $1 trillion, which is roughly 20 times what it takes in court investors at that multiple, and you ship on a schedule that flatters your story. Right before you file, right before you raise. Product timing quietly becomes fundraising timing. So stack the clocks up. A supply clock, set by one foundry in Taiwan. A competitive clock, where nobody dares blink first. And a money clock, tied to funding rounds and IPO windows. 3 separate forces, all shoving launches toward the same narrow handful of days. Line them up side by side and the mystery just dissolves. The same-day ship isn't spooky, and it isn't coordinated. It's overdetermined, too many arrows pointing at the same date. And when those days hit, you can watch the collision play out in the markets. The same week TSMC's blowout numbers landed, memory chip stocks actually plunged, and Nvidia, the single most valuable company on the planet at over $5 trillion, had quietly slid about 13% over the prior month. Demand is roaring, the record revenue is real, and yet the stocks are jumpy and nervous. That tension is the entire game right now, and there's a tell. Over that same stretch, TSMC's shares climbed while Nvidia's fell. The designer wobbled, the manufacturer rose. Money is quietly voting on who actually holds the leverage in this boom. Not the brand printed on the box, but the foundry that prints what's inside it. The market is slowly working out where the real choke point lives, and it isn't where the marketing is loudest. That's why one date has the whole industry holding its breath. TSMC reports its full earnings in a matter of days, and Wall Street is openly treating that single report as a health check for the entire AI boom. Not a lab's flashy demo. Not a chatbot benchmark. A foundry's quarterly numbers. When the supplier's earnings matter more to everyone than the products built on top of them, you know exactly where the power sits. So what does all of this actually mean for you? First, ignore the fireworks. When 5 labs ship in a single week, that's not 5 independent breakthroughs. It's one supply cycle expressing itself 5 different times, on 5 different logos. The real signal was never in the launch posts or the demo reels. It's sitting quietly in the foundry's order book, weeks before any of it reaches a stage. Second, watch the choke point, not the logos. The company with the most pricing power in this entire industry may not be the one with the famous chatbot on your phone. It may be the quiet manufacturer that every famous chatbot secretly depends on. Sitting on a fully booked line with far more demand than it can serve. It's an old lesson dressed in new silicon. In any gold rush, the most durable money tends to end up with whoever sells the shovels. And now you can see the one number I promised at the very start. 36%, the growth from a single foundry in Taiwan, is the reason every major AI lab keeps shipping on the same day. They aren't secretly syncing their calendars with each other. They're all syncing to the same supplier, the same constrained line, the same clock. The labs collect the headlines. The company actually setting the tempo barely gets named. If this reframed how you read AI news, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Who really holds the leverage, the lab or the foundry? Hope you got something out of this. Hit subscribe for more in this lane, and we'll see you in the next one.